my name's Matty and I'm 25 years old. This is just a bit of a story about my addiction. So my addiction first started when I was about 14, where I grew up in Leeds. I just started smoking a bit of cannabis with my friends after school, you know, that sort of thing, and kind of progressed as I got older, you know, as I left school, got into college, started doing other things in my life. It started to progress. So when I got to about 16, 17, started taking harder class A drugs, but just in a party environment on the weekends at a festival, that sort of thing. And then it kind of completely took a hold of my life. You know, my daughter was born when I was 19 with my partner, and we had our own house, own car, all of that good stuff with a job. But then, yeah, it slowly just started taking over. You know, the drugs became, unfortunately, my number one priority, you know, and everything else got put to the side. And through my addiction, I lost a job, you know, and ultimately ended up losing my family, losing the house I was living in, losing my car, losing friends, losing everything. It got that bad to the point where I went into rehab when I was 22 years old. And when I went to rehab, I had nothing, you know, I had no trust or anything from any of my family. I'd burnt all the bridges, pretty much all the bridges in my life apart from my parents. You know, I didn't have contact with my daughter or my daughter's mum. But I went to rehab, you know, I decided I need to go to rehab at 22. And I stayed there and then left rehab and moved to Derby. And I actually managed to stay clean. You know, I stayed clean and sober from any sort of, you know, mind or mood altering drugs for nearly a year and a half. And I made some amazing friends, built up that relationship again with my daughter, my daughter's mum, had the trust of my family again. But then just before New Year's, it all just got a bit much, you know, and I stopped doing the things that I was doing in the first place. You know, it led me back to that place of pain and misery where using drugs looks like an option again. And that's where my addiction took over again, and I picked up at the end of last year. And yeah, it was a horrible time for me. It was a horrific relapse. And again, I then lost all that amazing stuff that I'd built back up. But thankfully, because of the stuff that I was doing before that, I managed to get back in the solution and picked up the phone and sought some help again. And very quickly, I managed to get back into a different rehab. And this is where I've been now for just over 6 months. So I came to New Hope Rehabilitation at Rafeby Hall in Lincolnshire on New Year's Eve. You know, I actually come on New Year's Eve, and my first day clean was New Year's Day. You know, the 1st of January 2024 was the day that I got clean again. And I came here a completely broken man. You know, I just had to make a call to my daughter's mum to let her know that I'd relapsed. My dad had just dropped me off at the rehab, you know, very upset and you know, in shock because of how well that I was doing. So I came to rehab a broken man, you know, spiritually defeated, you know, mentally just exhausted and just full of guilt, shame, remorse, hatred for myself and confusion. I didn't understand why I was back in the situation that I was. But you know, from the minute I got to Rafeby Hall, I was just met with love. I was met with support from the staff, from all the other lads in the rehab. You know, I was lucky enough to know 1 or 2 of them at the time before I actually come here. So straight away, you know, them first few days were pretty horrific, you know, really hard for me because I'd lost all that contact with my family and friends, and I'd left a life that was full of volunteering, playing sport, socialising, being a really productive member of my family and my community. And I threw that all away, you know, for that relapse. So when I first got here, I was full of all those defects, you know, I was full of pride, full of ego, you know, I was very arrogant because I have got an understanding of the 12 steps, you know, and I've worked some of the 12 steps. So I felt so ashamed that I'd ended up back in rehab when I didn't have to do that. You know, I always told myself I'd never relapse and that this wasn't going to be my journey. Unfortunately, that's just part of my story now, and you know what, I'm so grateful for it looking back, because the stuff that I've learned in this 6 months being here at Rafeby is changing my life, and it's changing me as a person. Even though I had you know, that year and a half clean time before I relapsed, I was still a very, very poorly person inside. You know, I hadn't actually changed those things deep inside that made me who I was. You know, I was still putting myself in situations I shouldn't have, you know, still acting out on those defects, full of ego, you know, not doing some of the right stuff and not taking on suggestions from the people that knew best. You know, here what I've learned is that it doesn't matter what I know, it's whether I apply it on a daily basis. And here I really have. I've learnt some self-discipline. You know, I've built myself up a morning routine that's militant, you know, absolutely militant. I do a journal every day, I inventory every day, I reflect every day, and I've got contact with my spirituality, which, believe me, that's something I never ever would have, you know, I'd have laughed at you if that was something that was suggested a few years ago. That's just not been me. But you know what, where I am here today, the friends I've made, the staff, you know, the time and effort that has been put into me as an individual, you know, is special, really, really special. And now 6 months on, you know, I've been through some hard times in here. I've had lots of laughs, but lots of tears, lots of anger, lots of resentment, lots of frustration. But I've finished my program now, and I know that I've changed for the better because other people see it in me. You know, I've just had a weekend away with my daughter and my daughter's mum. Our relationship as a family kind of thing is better than it ever has been. I've got trust again with my parents and my family, and you know, my family are proud of me today. I've made some lifelong friends in here that, you know, mean a lot, and these friends I've got, I can ring them to laugh and I can ring them to cry, you know, and that for me is something I've always wanted in my life, which I've never had. I've always had failed relationships and failed friendships because of my behaviours, but today it's not like that. You know, the therapist has been amazing, really dug deep into the stuff that led me back here. You know, the stuff that led me back to that place of pain and misery was ultimately, you know, deceitful behaviours, not being honest with myself and not being honest with those around me because I think I know best. But yeah, I'm just very, very blessed and lucky that I'm in this position today where I'm about to move on to the next chapter of my life, feeling really confident, and positive instead of fearing change, because I've got a program in my life today, and I've got people that all they want is the best for me. You know, that is all they want from me, is to do well and succeed. Yeah, so when I leave here, I'll be moving to like the supported accommodation, which is the same. That's also New Hope, and that's actually where I was living before I had my relapse. You know, that's where I'd had the connection to be able to come to this rehab in the first place. But the supported accommodation that I'm moving to in Nottingham is exactly what I need right now. I'm not ready to be fully integrated back to society, having the responsibility yet of living on my own with all those temptations and responsibilities. And this is now the next stepping stone in order for me to slowly integrate back into society as a constructive person in society. It's going to give me a chance to really find out who I am, what my interests are again, and to build up that relationship whilst having the support of people I live with who are also in recovery and are working at the same program as me, and having friends around me that know what it's like. You know, I'm lucky that I get support from New Hope with various things, and you know, I'm just feel grateful that I'm moving to a place that's safe. You know, that's a big one for me. It's a safe place. You know, I know that I'm safe where I'm going, and that there's other like-minded people that, again, just want me to get well and do well. And it's going to give me a chance to get back to doing the things that I love, you know, playing sport, volunteering, you know, re-establishing some of those friendships that I'd kind of ruined throughout my using. And the main thing though is it's going to give me an opportunity now to really, really be present again in my daughter's life, and that for me is one of the most important things now, because that's the reason why I'm getting clean. You know, I'm getting clean to be a responsible parent, to be a parent to my daughter, because my daughter needs a dad, you know, and my family need their son, you know, and that's what this next step is going to give me a chance to just really cement my foundations. You know, I've been given a toolkit, I've been given spiritual principles, I've been given a new way to live since I've been in this rehab, and now I get the chance to actually put it into practice living in society, and that's something I'm very grateful and looking forward to. In a year's time, I see myself probably still being in supported accommodation, because I'm 25 years old and I've got the rest of my life ahead of me. So it's really, really important for me to really establish myself in recovery and get these foundations solid as a rock in order to then have the best chance to build a beautiful life. But in a year's time, you know, I've already signed up to a peer mentoring course. And for me, one of the biggest things is I want to be able to help other young men like myself who have struggled with addiction, that don't know another way to live. I want to show them and be a beacon of hope for them, that they can change their life and get all these amazing things back in their life. You know, so I definitely want to be volunteering, and ultimately, again, the biggest thing, if I'm honest, is to be much more involved in my daughter's life. That's a huge one for me, and you know, to have friendships that I know that are going to blossom and become more solid. You know, I want to be playing sport as much as possible, still doing as much for my recovery as I'll be doing today. You know, that I can't take my foot off the gas with that sort of thing. But where I want to be is to be volunteering in the recovery sector and helping other men like myself. And yeah, being the best parent, best friend and best son that I can possibly be, in order to eventually, when the time's right, to move into a career that's going to suit me. And that's why I want to do this volunteering, to give myself time to learn more about that, whilst also staying in the middle of the bed in the recovery sense. You know, if I'm volunteering in recovery and being around that network of people, it's going to help me build up a recovery network, one for my own personal recovery, but two for plans that I've got in the future, you know, about my plans that I want to do for my own career and my life. So yeah, I'm looking forward to, in that next year, having a consistent routine, you know, remaining healthy, remaining fit, remaining active in my family's life, and just doing the best that I can for the year ahead. You know what, I'm sat thinking about some of the fun times that I've had in this 6 months, and there's too many to mention, but the laughter and love that there is in this place, you know, considering that it's a big group of men that have all come from different backgrounds, jails, institutions, all come from broken lives. The fun and the laughter we have in here is second to none. You know, I've every day there's some sort of thing that will have you doing that belly laugh. You know, that laugh where it's uncontrollable and nothing else matters at the time. You know, whether it's something as simple as just the lads having a laugh on the van, or the days out that we have, or even just a walk, or even just sitting on the sofa having a laugh. There's never a dull moment in rehab. Don't get me wrong, there's tricky times, but there's always someone or something to make you laugh, and it's definitely something I'm going to miss, because you're laughing all day sometimes, and it doesn't even need to be at anything specific. But yeah, I think the funniest time is when I was on cooking, making scrambled eggs, and ended up using 60 scrambled eggs and a full pack of butter. But we had a laugh and everyone got fed in the end. But yeah, that's one of many things that not only recovery gives you, but coming to a rehab like this has just changed my life. I'd forgotten how to laugh. You know, I'd forgotten how to smile. I'd forgotten how to have those sort of emotions, and that really is one of the main things that I've got back from being in this place with the people around me. So anybody that's struggling with addiction and mental health, you know, because I've suffered with mental health myself, but with addiction, there is a way out. And I know that might not be something that you can possibly see or fathom at this moment in time. But this message it also goes to families of those that have got loved ones in addiction, and to people who are in addiction, is that there is a different way to live. You know, I had blinkers on for years. You know, the only thing that mattered in my life was getting that next drug, and I was on that repetitive cycle of pain and misery. But you know what? There's this completely different life filled with loving relationships, honest relationships, friends that don't want anything from you other than for you to be well and to be the best version of you. And no matter how far you think you might have gone into addiction, believe me, when I went into rehab the first time, I had no contact with my daughter. I'd burnt every single bridge with all my friends, all my family, my partner and everyone. And somebody said to me, nothing is impossible in recovery. And I never believed that at the start. I thought, you don't know my story. You've not used the same drugs as me. You've not been to the same places as me. But you know what? I sit here now, 6 months clean, and I can tell you nothing's impossible in recovery. All those things I've got back and more. I've got a peace of mind today. And all I want to say, if you're struggling and you're fed up of being sick and tired of the way you're living, reach out. Reach out. There's so many different organisations and charities in our communities now for mental health and drug addiction or any addiction, and there's always help. There's always someone that's willing to listen and point you in the right direction. And don't give up. There came a point for me where I'd had enough. I'd had enough of the way that I was living. And when you hit that point, that's where you surrender and just say, I've had enough now. And I guarantee you, if you reach out, people will be there to help you, because people was there to help me when I didn't know how to help myself. And people have loved me when I'd forgotten how to love myself. So there is hope, and it's just about getting to that point of surrender and really putting the action in. The last thing I'm going to say is, no matter what situation you're in, no matter what depths you're in, no matter what pain you're in, there's always hope for a new way to live. You can lose the desire to stop using drugs. You can find a new way to live, and you can stay clean one day at a time. All you have to do is reach out and admit that you want to change your life.